Hey, folks, welcome back to The Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and it is March 15th, 11 o'clock. It's Stephen Friday. Once again, here we are back again. And there's a lot of light pouring into this room. I feel like my hair light is bright. Folks, thanks for being here today. It's amazing when you know that you're going to be doing this. You know that you're going to be doing something, and how you prepare and what you think about. And the very nature of the context of Right Side Up is this idea of with Jesus, right? That's the concept. It's with. And when you think about that, I think when people hear the word Jesus, they're like, oh, that's that one thing that I've heard about before or that I assign a certain thing to. And I would even back up further and say, what does it look like to have a relationship with the creator of all things? Like, what if he said, all right, I can literally, and some people think I could tap into or I could connect with. And I had an experience recently that I think illustrates this really well, this concept of with. And then what we're going to look at today is incredible. It's incredible. And, each time that I do this, I thought at the beginning I was going to go, through all of the episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I've basically gotten to the point where I'm like, all right, Jesus, what do you want me to do today? And I like that better because I always, get something that's kind of inspirational. And this time, in this one, I don't know exactly what it is that's going to be the blow your mind thing. I just know this is what we're supposed to do today. So one of the cool things about not only this teaching, but the mystery of walking with Jesus, right? Literally walking with the creator is it's custom designed for you. I don't know if you know about custom designed tailored suits, but everybody's shaped differently. And to think that the God of the universe would want to have not only a personal relationship with you, but that would guide you through because there was purpose in the creation of you. And so what I want to share with you before we get into this is the concept of craftsmanship. I'm a big fan I just love to watch like videos on YouTube about people who make stuff. And of course, the concept of creating is that when we actually create something and we craft something, we're doing what God did, right? We're doing the thing that he did. Because my dog, who is a part of the animal class, doesn't make anything. Like the last time my dog made dinner, can't remember. But think about this for a second. Think about the things that you create, because in the world of value, creative ability is what is monetized. So if you think about it, there's no value outside of human labor. So you either provide a good or a service, meaning you create something or you're part of the creation of something, or you serve someone. That's it. That's all there is. You could boil everything down. So it's not about the proxies like money. It's about our creative ability. Because if there were dogs who could create stuff, we would likely, put them to work. Now you could say, well, there's some dogs who can do some pretty cool stuff, right? We do dog shows, fine. But you get the point, is that the creative ability that we have stands out among the animal kingdom. And it's because of who we've been created to be. And so I watch these videos of craftsmanship. And what do I see? I see this really interesting thing. And so I'll make this point. If you've ever made anything of real substance, right? And think about this. If you've ever written a book, you've ever really spent time on a paper in school, you've ever, built a table, or, you first think about what is the purpose of this thing that I'm making? Who's it for? How's it going to be used? All that kind of stuff. And if you think about it, the things that are really special are things that we often take a lot of time with, and they generally are edited and re-examined, and they are crafted. And so I watch a lot of things. I watch knife making videos. I watch, and my recent thing is Japanese pottery. Isn't that weird? Like people throwing pots that are like these masters. And here's the thing that the Lord showed me. And it was a picture of looking at my hands. And I was literally, I think I was doing my insulin in the morning, right? Old man, crypto heartbeat and his diabetes. And I was looking down at my hands and literally realizing, I said, And Jesus said to me in that, not audibly, but do you know we can do this together? Literally, we can do this together any second. And I thought about that for a second. It was really interesting to me because I think a lot of times I feel like God is only working in the big stuff. He's only interested in the big stuff, like the eclipse or, the heavenly bodies. And no, he made it clear to me that no, the thing that you're seeing when you see that master throwing that pot and the experience that he has, and he puts his finger in there and he rolls up the side and has this, he measures it and crafts it and all this stuff and starts with the core piece. He's taking the part of him that is God, and he, through his intention, is literally and can translate naturally that creative ability into something that started out as, dirt. And what do we see in that? One, it becomes useful, but two, when it's really crafted well, it takes on something. Something appears, and this happens in art, this happens in dance, this happens in culinary stuff. You can tell the difference between something that's been slapped together and something that's been crafted. And if you recognize the fact that, in a way, whether you acknowledge it or not, you are actually partnering with the framework of creation, and you're making a choice. And so today's topic is binary choice, and Steve's going to be talking about that in this discussion. I put in the timestamps of what we're going to be watching, so if you wanted to watch the original later, you can. But what's really amazing is this idea of the scriptures talk about holding every thought captive. There's no mystery in this, that I literally have this ability at every single moment to make a choice. I made the choice of showering. I made the choice of putting on a jacket. I made I set up things. I made sure that the camera was in focus. I took my medicine this morning. I came into the office. If we think about it, everything that we do in life is a choice. And sometimes we're surprised that the aggregate of making these choices is the craftsmanship of something special. But we also don't realize that we also are periodically leading to our own destruction. And it says, and it's really interesting, it says that there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. And what does that really mean? Is that we don't realize, my dad said when he came out of the resection of his lung, because he had lung cancer, and he came out of the anesthetic and he looked at me, and the first thing he said, "Don't smoke." Exactly like that. Don't smoke. And, for him, the cultural nature of smoking cigarettes was like all throughout that. And he started smoking when he was 13, and everybody smoked. And, you don't realize this, but that repeated effort of that created a scenario in which his alveoli in his lungs probably said, I'm done, right? And they mutated. The point, though, is we do things either with or without intention, and they lead somewhere. And what the God of creation has said to me through Steve and through these last 23 years is, hey, we could do this together. I'm like, wow, is that how it works? And of course, to see a guy like Steve Staggs, who is, I believe, like literally divinely sent to me, and you will see that. You see it when you watch all this content. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And I do this because it's only of value to those who are interested. It's only a value to those who are interested. And so, are you interested? And what's funny is I've had a number of people reach out to me and just send me, I'm interested. And what I take that is, you're not interested in me, and you shouldn't be interested in me. I'm just trying to continue what Steve did. And what did Steve do that's unique from anything I've ever experienced in Christendom over the years is that so many people are trying to be a middleman. And Steve is the first person who had so much to give, who said, every single time I talk to him, do not listen to me, ask him yourself. And so that so resonates with me, that it's not somebody who's like, look at me because I've got the information you don't have. And I see this all across, pastors in especially on YouTube. Let me tell you about what God said to me and not to you about the eclipse. I see that for what it is. Right. And it's like, well, why would we test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will? Because the truth can be probable. And so Steve was always saying to me, hey, go ask him yourself. And the same thing is true here, is that I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm not asking any of this. I'm doing this as a duty that I feel obligated to do in a wonderful way. It's a joy to do it, but you're walking down this path of feeling around the edges and understanding the very nature of how this thing was created. Because the things we don't understand, you know what we assign to them? Oh, that's like spiritual magic. It's not, folks. There's a framework and a structure to this, and it's built upon a binary choice, and that choice is yours. And that's what this whole thing is about. And so I appreciate you being here. Let me say hello to you, and then we'll jump right into the content. Mike Ostel, wonderful man. Talked to him yesterday. What's up, you rowdy RSU kids? Good to see you. Hey, I appreciate the praise. I appreciate that. You know, you just get tapped on the shoulder. Steve says, all right, I'm out. And I'm like, all right, I'll take it up. Ego Foundation, hello. With that's it's all about. It's so cool. The with is like everything. Joshua, it is so cool to have you here. Thanks for being here. I appreciate the commentary and your comments and all that stuff previously to this. And Crypto Compassion, what's up, man? Good to see you. Hex Glenn is here. Sam Kemp's on the road. Just stop by to say howdy. We'll catch a replay. Thanks, man. Hexonium's here. Be careful, Sam. Let's see who else is here. Crypto Compassion. Yeah, with wisdom is through him. I love that. You've made it. That's awesome, dude. That's so awesome. What's up, Pulse Bean? Good to see you. From Canada. All right, let's jump into this. So this is episode number. Whoa, sorry. I'm going to turn that on mute so that doesn't bother us again. Okay, so this is episode number 26, and I put the timestamps in here. Get ready to have your mind blown. I mean, grab a cup of coffee and sit back, because this is crazy stuff, and it's good. And there's going to be something in here for you. And I think one of the key things is what I do now when I rewatch this stuff. I'm like, all right, what do you want me to see? How do you see this? And what do you want me to see? So I hope that for you as well. What's up, Moondog? Good to see you. All right, here we go. There's another data point right there. I'm like, okay, we got to keep speaking this. But I just
Yes, yes, yes. Right on. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, gosh, we could go in a lot of different, you know, directions with, you know, with that, Matt. And I mean, you know, the thing I have to offer folks from my point of view is to give a peek inside the kingdom of God and how God created, how he designed the creation to function. You know, I mean, I started this not with any particular interest other than what I described, you know, way back when. Of anybody want to know Jesus? Well, hey man, here I am. I want to know him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know about him. And I didn't think in those days of the difference between knowing about and knowing him. It was just a given to me that, hey, if I want to know the kid down the street who just moved in, I got to walk down there and say hi and start talking to him.
Yep.
And seeing if he wants to play. I mean, it's so basic and simple in that way. And it's exactly the same way. What Jesus said we talk about all the time on the streams is there's no exclusivity in this club. It's an inclusive club, meaning all of creation is invited to the party. You know, not everybody is going to want to do that, but everybody's invited. So if you're invited, then what are you going to do with that invitation?
Yeah.
Well, what happens back, you know, even going in the religious world, they create all kinds of barriers and conditions and, you know, and standards and all of these various things. Well, when was the last time you had that with any other relationship in your life? Okay, now, if you want to meet the kid down the street, this is what you have to do. The first thing you got to do is you got to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then what you have to do is you have to go down there and you have to see if he has a book written about you. And if he has a book written about him, then what you have to do is you have to go and you have to read that book and really understand that book. And then you see what I'm saying? Yeah. The requirements that we place on getting to know God are so insane. Yeah. Compared to any other basic fundamental way relationships are built. It's mind-blowing.
That's one of the most compelling things about this whole, you know, discussion that we've had over this last year is the simplicity of engagement.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. Because there's a lot of things where you got to get your act together before you meet the guy, right? As if he's a wizard. And I think that that's one of the things that makes this so accessible. I've said to you many times that you're making Jesus so much more accessible to people. Well, you're telling the story about when you're 6 years old and the pastor says, "Hey, do you want to meet Jesus?" And you took him seriously. You're like, "Yes, I want to meet the guy. I'll introduce you to him." You're like, "All right, where's he at? Is he in the back?" And of course, you think about that from a child perspective. Anyone who's out there, you look at your life, Steve, and what I take from it is this. Here's a guy who's been wired as a professional, right? You got to the major leagues in baseball, which is to me an indication of your drive, your intensity, your focus to detail, your willingness to labor through pain, and discipline. And then to think that gaming analogy of baseball and professional baseball has led itself to, I'm going to apply these same concepts of who you've made me to be. And I'm going to apply that to you.
Yeah.
And what's the fruit of it? I think if I were to say, what's the nature of the fruit that comes from this effort, that how God made you and what you've done with him from when you're 6 years old to going, hey, who's this guy? You went down the street to meet Jesus, he moved in. And what I think is so cool is you've asked him questions. And what has he shared with you? I feel like a lot of what he shared with you is how he made this thing.
Yes.
And I think what's so neat about that is I've probed and probed and probed. And we've talked a lot before we started doing these streams. And a lot of times I was like, "Come on, this is like rattling my cage, Steve." And I was asking you some really basic fundamental questions that you've heard before.
Yeah.
But we said it many times. The truth can be probed and probed and probed and probed.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the cool things about this is that you've never said to me, "Just trust me." No, never. You said, "Hey, go ask him yourself. Test it." And so I was having this discussion. This is so cool. This is literally stream of consciousness. I'm sitting with Ray this morning, and he said, "Well, you got to figure out what God wants from you. What Jesus wants you to do." That's what he said. What Jesus wants you to do. And I was like, "All right, well, how do you do that, Ray, Mr. Smart Guy? How do you know what Jesus wants you to do?" And what's interesting is we recalled, I want to say it's Romans 12:2 or something like that. And it's like, "Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." What's amazing is the term test and approve.
Yeah.
And thought about this one. So I'm not going to conform to the patterns of this world because the patterns of this world are upside down. So what am I going to do? I'm going to test and approve. And I thought about those words and they meant something new to me this morning.
Yeah.
What is the idea of testing something? And so what's interesting is I said, "Hey, Steve, what about this thing?" You go, "Well, why don't you go ask him yourself?" Because if it's true, he'll confirm that with you. And that's the form of testing.
Yes.
The other piece of this is this idea of approving. It's one thing to know about it and it to be true factually. And it's another thing for it to be approved as a functional mechanism. Does that make sense? The difference between the two?
Absolutely.
And I was like, hold on a second. So the will of Jesus, the will of God in your life is knowable. But the first thing he warns about is the fact that the patterns of this world will be something that will be a distraction to you understanding his will. And that's like, bing, light bulb, aha. And it made me think about Whitney Magic. Did you see that stream yesterday?
I did. What a sweet soul she is. Yeah.
She is. And she talks about sparkling and magical. And I was like, that's exactly the reason. That's what I saw in her. I'm like, how rare is it to meet someone that's such a breath of fresh air, but somebody that is so, living in a way and it's funny, she talks in terms of energy and it's true. I see the sparkle and I see the magic, those are worthwhile terms. And I really reflected on that conversation because we come from very different worldviews. Like she didn't grow up in the church. I didn't really grow up in the church, but I got acclimated. They dunked me and I got dunked. But I learned the Christianese and all that stuff to be acceptable in this community. And it's interesting when you engage with somebody who's really curious. And so with that, Steve, I just I had a thought. And I wanted to show you something that I think would be really helpful for at least our first hour, even though we're 22 minutes into it. But it really fits into this idea of what you've done for me. So I was in the shower fixing my hair and I saw this picture. And so I pulled some images together and I put this together. Okay. And the thing that came to me was this idea of the quote that everybody in this world has heard. And that is, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And this is the picture. Okay. And so it's two people and these two people are looking at the world. From my perspective, I'd call it, you're looking at creation, right? But, for someone on the left here is looking at the world just like the person on the right is looking at the world. And they're going, "Hey, how does this thing work?" And it may be as simple as how do you make friends? It may be as simple as how do you get a job? It may be as simple as how do you read the TAT leaves to see if it's going to go up into the right, bro? But at the end of the day, you're trying to understand how it functions and how you relate to its functioning. But what's really interesting is I also reflected on the very nature of the civilized society. And I think about historically, the first writings that we have that we know of are Sumerian cuneiform tablets. And we didn't know how to translate those until we saw the Rosetta Stone. And what's interesting is if you go back into all of written history and then you fast forward to today, a lot of what we have is actually built on the back of historical documents. And there have been some fundamental things that people said, "Hey, this is really important and you need to remember this." And I can't help but think of the Jews in the Passover, right? I'm sure there were some kids that were born after they got into the promised land and they're like, "Why are you guys so worked up about this whole thing?" And the older people are like, "Hey, I want to remind you, we're going to eat this meal. Why? Because we came out of Egypt. Before you came here, you punk ass kid, we were in slavery. And we literally walked across the Red Sea And then it like fell onto the other people. And we're doing that today, right? The Passover meal. We're like, hey, we were once slaves and God rescued us. He redeemed us. So I want to kind of talk about that in this context because so many young people today are looking at the world just like anyone else is looking at the world and going, man, there's a lot changing, Steve. And so this is like a big old softball pitch that we could spend like 50 hours on.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go back to the picture we talk about so often in Mark chapter 4. The where Jesus started the what we call parables now, but when he started by saying, "Listen to this," and the whole idea behind that word "listening" is to listen, to hear, to perceive, inwardly what is going on. In other words, it's not just listen so you can regurgitate, or it's a much deeper kind of word. And so he tells the story, an agricultural story to an agricultural community, and the multitudes leave. Oh, we got that. Great reminder. Yep, I've got to be more diligent. God made this to where there was going to be an abundance. Yep, I understand what the challenges are and what are some of the things that are going to compete against this bountiful return we're going to get. And yeah, thank you for that, Jesus. Thank you for the reminder. And they went home, and guess what? I bet you most of them were going to be diligent with getting up the next day to do a better job of sowing their fields and taking care of their fields. But then there were a handful of them, as we talked about, that pursued Jesus and said, "Hey, man, we know you got something else up your sleeve. What are you talking about?" Well, somehow we get the impression you're not just talking about an agricultural lesson. You're not just teaching us how to get a bumper crop. What are you thinking?
There's something more here.
Yeah, man, we can feel in our bones. We're interested as can be. We have no clue what it is, but I bet you know, Jesus. What are you thinking, man? And he says, "Oh, to you it has been given to understand the mysteries of the kingdom of God, while the others remain outside and receive everything in parables." What a profound answer. Now, just take a few minutes to unpack that one.
Yeah. There's so much there.
Yeah. Well, guess what those two people looking at the world are looking for? They're saying, how's this thing work?
Yeah.
Wherever their area of need or interest or concern might be, how does this thing really work? What's going on? What you mentioned it a number of times, right? The old dark systems are fading away. There are new light systems coming up. Well, she doesn't use the vocabulary of most of us gray hairs, but the point is she's interested. Well, isn't that where she actually started?
Yeah.
I wanted to know more.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know more. Well, guess what? That's a searcher. That's somebody who's interested. And so the path that she's taken has answered a lot of her questions without giving her the answer to the source of all the things that she perceives is right versus what is wrong. And so she continues to search. She'll get there. And when she gets there, she's going to get to a person. She's not going to get to a system or a thing. She's going to get to a person. And in my view, what everything I heard about it was when Jesus calls, she's going to answer because she is a legitimate truth seeker.
Yeah.
And so guess what? Those two people, when they look at the planet, they're going to look at the planet as if the planet is going to speak to them, and it will. Or they can step back and say, "Hey, man, somebody built this planet. I think I'd like to talk to that dude.
Yeah.
I'll bet that's the guy who I need to talk to, the one who built it." Okay? And so that kind of just describes all of us. Are we going to look at the planet and expect us to teach us about itself, which it will do? Or isn't there a better way, which is to take a step back and ask the guy who actually built it?
Yeah. Wow. There's I often see this repeat itself is people worshiping the creation versus the creator.
Yeah.
And I've like I went through this era of arguing with flat earthers. And what was interesting is we just kind of agreed to disagree. I just didn't have the time or interest to try to argue the case for a globe. But what was interesting is it just became apparent to me, why would I worship the creation versus the creator? Because the one thing we had in common was the fact that we agreed that there was a creator of whatever shape this thing is.
Yeah.
And when you start getting to that point, it's interesting. And I think one of the challenges is I always feel like Christian folks, the people that are like, eager beavers, it's like they want to get married before courtship, right? They're like, "Hey, let's get married." I'm like, "Well, no, you don't get married to somebody until you know them." Yeah. Unless I guess it's an arranged marriage. And it feels like it's out of joint, it's out of order. And I love what you're saying because what's packed in that agricultural story of those who chased after him was, in a way, what I would consider to be the church, right? We think of church in terms of a building, but also in that story, he called them the called out ones. Like, what makes you called out? And that's another thing I think about is like, did you decide that you were super interested? Well, I think you applied some effort to like seeking it, but what drew you? What made you, you were made a certain way to go all the way to the top in baseball.
Yeah.
Well, I would say there's a lot of those elements of who God made you to be that have made you go this distance with him. It's not by accident.
Well, yeah, there's and I will, blend concepts here a little bit. To play at the major league level, you are literally in a 1% category. You are less than 1% of the, not just general population, but even the population that enjoys playing that game. Now, most of the other 99 percenters look at that and say, oh, that's because you had great physical ability.
Yeah.
See, so there is a perception about those who play at that level. And by the way, I can say the same thing in areas of business or in science or in literature or in the art. Anyway, anyone who reaches the top 1%, it's not just because of their talent or even good fortune, as the other 99% might perceive it. It's no, you are wired and built a particular way, and then it's up to you to exercise the various choices driven by interest as to whether or not you want to commit the kind of discipline and effort that's required to perfect your craft. And so it's not just physical ability, it's just not opportunity. There is a commitment to perfecting your craft. You're just not any longer interested in playing. You're interested in playing at a level that can compete at the highest level. And to do that, you have to be driven by a intense commitment to perfect your craft. Not everybody's willing to do that. I can tell you many a story where there were guys that had way more physical ability than I had, but they didn't make it past, the first or second year, because the mental strain, that challenge your internal fortitude to continue to press on in the face of overwhelming competitive resistance. And that's what it is, competitive resistance. The guys across from you have the same interest, intention, desire, and skill that you have. By the way, you never experienced that before where you came from. You never experienced an entire opposing team that was as good as you or better. So guess what that opposing team is doing? Through their competitive resistance, they're challenging your own commitment to perfecting your class and perfecting your craft and perfecting your mental and creating your mental fortitude to endure against overwhelming opposition. Well, that's what a 1%er does. Now, is it because does the 1%er better than everybody else? I would say no. I would just say that's the role they're designed to play, because at that level of competitive interplay, they have to possess those attributes. Otherwise, they're going to get their butts handed to them. Well, okay. Is that a physical example of what happens in a spiritual dimension, a spiritual world? And my experience is absolutely. My physical training prepared me for the spiritual reality that accompanied the life I was given to live. Heaven and earth are operating simultaneously in me, and both have competitive resistors, those who are trying to compete with me and the God whom I serve in order to assert their will over me and my God. Well, what am I going to do? Am I going to cower in fear because that guy throws a yak that I've never seen before? That's baseball jargon for a curveball. He throws a yak, drops off the table. I look at it and I go, like I did when I was 10 years old, and go, man, who could ever hit that thing? Well, that was a competitive resistance. That guy was intending to exercise his skill to get me out, and he did a really good job at it.
Yep.
Now, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to take that and cower? Am I going to take that and learn from it and say, okay, next time you throw that dude, I'm taking it right back at you? Well, not everybody has that mental attitude. And so Jesus not only has created us, but then it accompanies us in the development of the skills and attributes he's given to us so that we can play our position in life and deal with the competitive resistance that comes at us. And it's real.
Yeah.
And you don't know how real it is until you get in the game. And it's like, oh, wow, man, I just thought this was a Sunday school lesson.
Yeah.
This isn't just a Sunday school lesson.
No,
this is how it works. My goodness, I better pay closer attention.
Well, and I think that's a really good, what a great, pause is to say, why are we doing this? And, if you think about it, there's a curiosity in both of us. You've journeyed longer than I have, but where does it lead? And, I look at, this image, right? This image, there's so much wrapped up in it for me,
Yes.
because I'm interested in so many things, Steve, right? I'm the person on the left and I'm the person on the right.
Yeah.
And I think about, and I see this in so many people around the world, right? I listen to the physicists and I listen to the conspiracy theory people, and I listen to the artists and the musicians and all of these different people. I'm really just interested and curious. And people are recognizing things, right? We build billions of dollars of particle accelerators because we have a hunch that if we smash these things together, we might see the Higgs boson. And let's call that the God particle, right? Well, what are we doing? And it makes me think, we have this deep, deep desire to understand who we are and how we fit into this system. And I think that that's kind of a natural thing. And so you've got people that are coming from different perspectives. And I think in a kind of a liberal arts education, they want you to have a liberal understanding, meaning a wide view of kind of everything. Well, I think one of the things that's so important to me to point out here is that, are there lessons to learn from history? And there certainly are some lessons to learn from history. And so I want to make this case. If you knew that there was, and Whitney Magic brought this one up, she's like, yeah, the Akashic records, right? That there's this wisdom. I read the book years ago, Think and Grow Rich, and they talked about infinite intelligence, right? Which was really more of a watered down version of God.
Yeah.
So they just didn't want to push it as a religious thing, but said, hey, there is information and knowledge beyond you. And of course, that's what this Akashic record thing is as well. But what's interesting is we talked about lookalikes, and we talked about a world that's upside down. And when I look at the historical, go all the way back to anything that we have that is an account. And there's a lot of different accounts, right? In the East, we have all kinds of accounts of Vishnu, right? And all of these different gods. We've got the Greek gods, we've got Roman gods, we've got all of these different kind of superhumans. We've got hybrid animal man things. We've got the Anunnaki. We've got all of this stuff historically that we look to. And it's interesting, if you take kind of world religions, a lot of what society reflects upon when it comes to kind of civilization is an underpinning of morality, of how should we function and survive, and how should we treat other people in this context. And I would say for the most part, there's this element of civility, like how do we live without killing each other? Because once you're dead, you can't really control or choose many things. So you see that. Well, as you learn the different views and you learn the different perspectives, and of course that's being highlighted right now when you look at this Hamas Israel thing, if you want to point it out, like these ideologies, right? And I think most Western people would say, does any group of people deserve to be eradicated on either side, right?
Yeah.
Would things be easier if Hamas didn't exist? I think the Israelis would say, yeah. And I would think that the Hamas kids that I watched say, all I want to do is stab Jews and run them over with my car. These are like 12-year-olds. That's what they're taught. And there's something in us, regardless of what our background is, that says, you know what, that doesn't seem right. There's something amiss there. But this idea of historic information being relevant to not repeating issues of the past, we have to recognize that many of these things were passed on orally prior to the printing press. And I want to kind of wrap some big things that we've talked about over the last 25 episodes, is that in the modern church, we're lifting up this book that is a translation of an account. And one of the things I think is really powerful, and I used in that image this kind of scroll above someone's head, if you look at the basis for civilized society, and I would say, what is the result of kind of America? And I don't want to praise America right now as the current system to hold up.
Yeah.
But what are the fundamentals of this civilized society? And it's interesting when you look at and you peel back the Judeo-Christian ethic, right? And you think about, where does the law come from? And why is it important that we resolve disputes? Because you think about what is the practical nature of the law in society? Not the religious part of it, but the functional part. Well, we have disputes and somebody's got to resolve them. And we got to agree that when we go through this process, that it actually is resolved. We've built our society on the back of these historical documents. And these folks, long before there was written documentation, would tell stories to their sons as they got up and walked along the path that, hey, here's how things work. And here's how you can kind of survive maybe a little bit longer and have maybe a little bit more of a safe and secure life. I think without that context, if we just look at things in a modern perspective of saying, well, there's some people that are smashing electrons together and getting the Higgs boson, or it's the quantum, or it's AI, or it's transhumanism, or it's a modern view of technological things, that we're not looking at the author, we're looking at the creation. And we are looking actually at something that's trying to be a replacement or a lookalike for the genuine article. And the genuine article, in my opinion, is the author. And without the context of understanding, where does this whole thing come? Where does this framework come from? Because if you remove people from the earth, like literally no people on the earth, and you just have animals, it functions pretty well.
Yeah.
And it functions in an abundant way. And it doesn't, there's some killing that happens, but it's not, the same hoarding and lording that I see. So I think that those that are interested, I think ultimately it's weird. It's almost like a pyramid. You have a group of people who might see, all right, I understand the context of this historical things, but it's almost like there's two people climbing ladders on either side and they're leaning together. And at the very, very top is a person, and it leads them to the same place. I'm not saying it's a universal thing, but I almost feel like this is what I read in the Bible. The heavens declare.
Yeah.
You can't get away from the author and creator of this thing. No matter how far you probe and deeply you dive, as you see the truth, you see him.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say about that.
and that's a lot. And that's it, man.
That's what I wanted to get across though, in that whole thing, is that
yes,
it's worth probing.
Well, absolutely, man. I mean, in today's world, we hate the idea of binary. Okay, and we see it everywhere. We see, well, we don't want to be a man or a woman. We want to be an infinite variety of the male or the female.
Yep.
And yet, the appearance of the one who is rejecting their birth, gender, is taking on the aspects of the opposite gender.
Yeah.
So the point is that you're still not escaping the binary.
Can I just say this? I have to say this. I was on Twitter last night, and somebody made this point that there was this vegan alternative food that was
Pepperoni.
made to look like chicken, and it had a wooden dowel through it to be like a bone. And the comment was, if you don't like meat, why would you create something that looks like meat?
Oh, I saw a similar thing on one of the cooking shows about it was vegan pepperoni, and the guy said, "Hey, man, if you're making vegan pepperoni, maybe you're not a vegan."
Yeah. Like the tofurkey. That's another one. Anyway, I don't want to bash vegans. I actually was a vegetarian for a while and saw some benefits from it, but
Yeah, for sure.
it's so the irony of it. So anyway, I'm sorry that made me laugh last night.
The irony of this, speaking of irony, is that we hate the idea of binary.
Yeah.
We absolutely despise it because in binary is simplicity. And the creation is, although it is infinitely complex from our point of view, it operates on a very simple premise. Choose good or choose what is not good. What is not good is called evil, and what is good is called good. Well, okay, then what is good and evil? So you go into the garden from a scriptural point of view. Where is the binary? Okay, the binary is in, okay, you have two trees. One tree is going to tell you that is going to promise you that you're going to be able to choose right and wrong, good and evil, all by your lonesome. That you're going to have the capacity, like God, to choose that all by yourself. The other is it promises you life. And so here is the deal. You can feast on the tree of life as much as you want, for I have created all things to perpetuate and to nourish life. Feast away. My advice is not to mess with that tree of good knowledge of good and evil, because it's going to promise you one thing but deliver another. Well, guess what? You can deal with that. The two people looking at that from a distance, there was a point in time that Adam and Eve were looking at those two trees with exact same questions in their mind that in your little picture illustration. They're looking at the trees. They're going, not tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? It's smack in the center of the garden. Man, I cannot even escape this thing. I can't hide it because everywhere I turn to look, it's right there, right in the middle. I'm staring at it every time I do something. And what it's doing is that competitive resistance that's saying, okay, I've told you what's up. I told you how this is going to work. What is your choice? You have a binary choice. And the binary choice is to either accept what I say or reject it and make your own choice. That's binary. There's a story in the New Testament about, we call it the rich young ruler, who came and chased Jesus down. Wow, that kind of sounds like the Mark 4 example. Chased him down and said, "Good teacher, what must I do to be saved?" And Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? There is only one who is good. But if you want to know, how to be saved, then do all the things that are written in the book." And the guy said, "Man, I've done all the things written in the book, and I'm still shooting blanks, man. It ain't happening." And Jesus said, "Okay, you really want to know what's going on? Sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me." Oh man, the guy went away, said, "I can't do that," because he was a man of great wealth, yada, yada, yada. For those who understand the story, what was the man missing? He had all things material, had every material thing he could ever want. He had executed every religious requirement placed upon him. And still, he recognized he was missing something. And so what did Jesus say? What you're missing is me. I'm what you're missing. If you'll rid yourself of all of the distractions in his particular case, because the competitive resistance for him was his great wealth that was competing against his great need. Which do you choose? It's a binary choice. In his particular case is, are you preferring to keep your great wealth that provides you great privilege, or are you really interested in solving the great hunger that is within you that your wealth cannot satisfy? Which do you choose? He made his choice. Now, did Jesus condemn the guy? Didn't condemn the guy. He just let him make his choice, because he built the creation to operate on a binary choice. See? Are you going to choose good? And who is good? There's only one good, God alone. What is of and from God is good. Everything else is evil. Which do you choose? It's a binary choice. We hate binary choices today. And yet that's what provides us with the simplicity of the things that, the challenges that face us. In the example I was sharing about, competitive resistance, you're constantly faced at the major league level of professional sports with a choice. Am I going to show up for one more play? Am I going to show up for one more play? Am I going to show up for one more play? It's a binary choice. Yes or no. And guess what? Sometimes guys get to the no answer.
Yep. you want to take this to a whole deep level. Is we've talked many times about um, the double slit experiment. And what's really amazing is the further people have looked into the very, very small, which, the smallest we're looking at least right now, is the quantum level. And so as we drill down and drill down and drill down, what have we noticed? We've noticed this thing that is a paradox or a mystery. And it is most well illustrated in the double slit experiment, where when we're not paying attention to it, it's a wave. And when we pay attention to it and observe it, it collapses into a particle. And so a lot of extensive research has been done on this. And it's amazing because it looks like these photons that were, entangled actually go back in time and change their decision. But what's really at the fundamental level of this, and this is not religious at all, it's the scientific world drilling into the creation and trying to understand it. And you know what's come out of that? Quantum computing.
Hmm.
The very nature of quantum computing is a binary choice. And I don't mean it's binary, it's even better than binary. It's a function of your observation. The very nature of who you are determines its state. So it's in all states at once until you make a choice to observe it. When you think about this idea of, well, yeah, we have free will, you have no idea how powerful your free will is.
Absolutely.
So often we've put it at the bottom of the pyramid, right? We thought the natural world is everything above. But I want to remind people, the nerds that are out there, think about how gaming works. I'm really interested, and I follow technology, especially as it relates to resolution, in imagery, in compression, in video, in all of this, right? And so one of the things that I've followed is, I played video games since I was a kid, and they were not good, right? It was Pong, right? It was like a square pixels and a square pixel, and you moved it around. And now where are we? Well, now we've got Unreal Engine 5.3, and we've got this luminosity. Well, how do we create now certain games? Well, what we do is there's a series of polygons. And so we take the observer. And so let's say this is a first-person shooter game, and it's the perspective of the person who's observing the environment. And in order to preserve resources, we only render that which you're looking at. Okay, so think about this. We are creating like the creator created. When we look at the double slit experiment, it collapses upon our conscious observation. Well, when we build systems, we try to preserve our resources. And so what we end up doing is we say, okay, way, 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 way off in the distance is a tree. Well, that tree, because it's not in focus for the observer, we're going to have a representation of. The series of polygons that's required to render at this distance is like 10.
Hmm.
But let's say the user decides he wants to go over and check out that tree. In fact, he wants to use his fancy hatchet to cut it down. We do not render the inside of that tree in the wood until the hatchet comes out. And what's really amazing about the nature of how we create and how the physical systems of this world that we observe are happening is that it is actually a component of the created person. And so and this really goes back to the whole Elohim thing, Steve, that connects all of it back.
Yes.
Is this idea that, well, why is it that you show up for the next play? Why is it when you cross that chalk, everything goes quiet? Why is it that, Steve, you know what? I went to Boise State as a junior in high school, and I got booed and laughed off the stage.
Hmm.
I ran for governor, and it was humiliating, Steve. And I sat for the rest of that camp out on the basketball court, and I said to myself, wherever I go to college, I'm going to be student body president. And I was.
Yep. Yep.
Why? Because I decided that. And of course, you got all kinds of self-help and all this kind of stuff. But the big thing that is really, I'm speaking to the choir and to myself in this scenario, is what do you want? And the thing that's interesting about it is, are you aligning yourself with the nature and character of the creation? Because there is a framework on which it is built. And I think what's incredible is, what is it, John 5:15? Without me, you can do nothing.
Nothing.
And you think about this, well, then that means that with you, I can do everything.
Yeah.
And that's so like, wow. And it's, it just seems like it keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating. And it's like, what do we see? The leaf looks like the tree, this infinite resolution that we see God in all things. And that if we align ourselves with his framework in creation, which is literally declaring to us who he is and what it is. And it's so grand. I mean, light travels at 186,000 miles per second.
Yeah.
We can observe galaxies that are 380 million light years across. Light takes 380 million years to get across the Sombrero galaxy.
Yeah.
And that's one of a billion galaxies.
Yeah.
And we go, the heavens declare. So to think that I certainly am not saying, hey, I understand how it all works. But there's something that I've seen that if I align myself with the very nature of its framework, and I consider the historical knowledge that's been preserved that says, hey, there's a guy, he's alive, he speaks, and he knows all. Well, what if I tried this on for size? What if I actually understood who he created me to be, and I walk with him in this? It's very logical, but it's also very simple, but so difficult because we are in this world where we think we are gods, that we think that we can do it. We go our own way because we have that element of him in us, that we are actually powerful, if you will. But it's like, well, without me, you can do nothing. How do you square that stuff? Because I know there's a lot there that you have to say.
No, You have an audience for a reason, Matt, because you have a way, like Joe was talking last week, of articulating things that resonate with people, that provides them with a vocabulary that helps them, consider things. Um, you know, the way we're talking about, the wave then collapsing to the particle. Well, isn't that exactly what vision does?
Yeah.
You have a vision about something in your mind's eye. You see it. You set your eyes upon it. You start paying attention to it. You start acting upon it, and what eventually happens? The thing that was intangible eventually takes on tangible expression.
Yeah.
That's the creation. That's Hebrews 11. By faith we understand this little packet of power that Jesus sends when he speaks to us, enables us to understand how the creation even came to be. The Father had a vision, and guess what he began to do? He set his eye upon it, and he said, "Son, let's do this." And the next thing you know, some period of time later, we're standing on the planet talking about how once we see something that is intangible, we set our gaze upon it, we
Yes.
put our intention, we choose to act on it, and before you know it, I'm a student body president.
Yep.
How in the world does that work? That's how I've created, and it all began with a binary choice.
Yep.
Yes or no. Yes or no. Will you? Won't you? What's fascinating, again, back to your little picture, is we look at whatever it is that we are a part of on the planet, and like the story in Mark 4, we can decide for ourselves how we're going to not only view but then relate to that planet. Some people deal with it on their own. They say, okay, I'm going to figure this out all by myself. I don't want any other inputs. I'm just going to tackle it all by my lonesome. Guess what? That's a binary choice. I'm going to do it alone, or I'm going to do it with something or someone else. Binary choice. There are others who look at it through the prism or lens of something. That's the scroll that's a little bit, above the gal's head. Okay, is she going to look at the planet through the lens of that scroll? Oh, by the way, we call that God. So we call that the Bible inside the religious system. And I'll get to the religion thing in a minute. See, so we look at the planet through the lens of some document, some experience that someone else had on the planet, and then we view the planet through their experience. Well, we do that all the time inside the church when we look through the lens of the Bible. Well, there's a third one that's not represented there, and that is looking at the planet through the lens of the one who created it. And guess what? That's a binary choice too. Same thing. That's a waveform until we set our eyes and our intention upon it and exercise our choice to say, will you teach me how to do that? And eventually what begins to happen, it collapses into a particle form, and you begin to see the particles in the way the particle designer created them to function. And it is mind-blowing. It is, wow, this is so simple. In the beauty of its simplicity, there is infinite complexity that creates this thing into something that I had no idea existed.
Well, Steve, let me ask you this. Wow. I hope that was just a blessing to you, because this is now the second time, or at least second time, that I've watched that, and it's amazing. The topics in this, clip from Steve Sykes, and I'm going to challenge you. There's 37 episodes with Steve, and it is so jam-packed with just truth and wisdom. But I love that it always comes back to, hey, this is your choice if you're interested. And I love it. I absolutely love it, because it's like, it answers all the questions that I've always had. Meaning, not that Steve had the answers, but it's like, well, there's no barrier. There's no one that stands in between. And I think about, because I really can recognize those that really question the whole Jesus versus the church thing. Meaning, I see this Jesus guy, he seems pretty together. All the world religions are like, yeah, he's a good guy. But then the people that say they are represented, or they represent him, they're the problem, right? He's like, yeah, it's these people that are a problem, not this guy. And if you think about throughout history where, all kinds of bad things have happened in the name of God, we see obviously, the fact that people are using this thing, right? They're using this thing for their own selfish ambition or gain. And a lot of times what you see is the same thing you see in crypto. Everybody's trying to get in between, right? That we talk about this in crypto. We talk about counterparty risk. Well, that's a counterpart. That's a middleman. And I think what's so exciting about this time, because to me, this isn't all like separate. Like crypto and the money and abundance is not separate from this discussion. This is all actually one discussion, because they're completely related. because we all have this sense that this is not right. Like the way things are made right now, like, hey, this isn't right. This isn't heaven. Trust me. I mean, I've seen all kinds of crazy things. And it's like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. But when I look out into creation, there's evidence that, hold on, it's like me saying earlier that what if we took all the people off the planet? What would it look like? And you think about the abundant nature of that. It says in Haggai 2, it says, I came to a heap of 50 measures, and there were only 20. And the Lord says, I cursed your hands with blight, mildew, and hail, and you did not return to me. What's this idea of returning to him? What's this idea of holding each thought captive and literally saying, hey, what do you think about this? How do you see this? Let's walk together in this. Well, that's where life is. And to think, well, what are we all looking for? Well, do I need another Super Bowl ring? Right? I'm one Lambo? Is it a Lambo? Is it money? Is it, what do you want? Well, we have all of these things that we worship, like money. And we say, well, if I had the money, then by logical sense, I'd have peace in my life. You know what's funny is I've known an actual billionaire personally. I knew him, talked to him, asked him questions. And he said, and I literally would see him at his desk signing like stacks and stacks of checks. And he would literally say to me, he's like, you don't realize what you think you want. Because with, a certain amount of resources becomes a lot more problems. And we know the classic story of the person who wins the lottery and then somebody kidnaps their kid. And, you get to a certain point and you're like, okay, so all of these things that I've been chasing after, whether it's the physical look of my body, what am I worshiping? Is it money? Is it Lambo? Is it this thing, this vision? And what's really interesting is that, and I'm just going to tell it straight to you, you've been created uniquely. You're not an accident. And you know this deep inside of you, that you have something special to offer, that you are created uniquely. And you know this, you see this. I mean, even people who have like twins, right? The identical twins, they're completely different people, right? The kids, they might look the same, but they're different. And you know that there's something about you that is unique. And you have this deep desire also for peace, but you don't have peace. And I look at my dad who is self-medicating, right? We all have all kinds of trouble, right? There's a lot of resistance in this world. And it's interesting that he gave us choice, but he also gave us the pathway. He gave us the answer, but it's something you have to choose. And so when I look at a guy like Steve, and what I'm so thankful for is he said, you know what? The result of being a follower of Jesus, right? The result of just holding that thought captive and saying, you know what? You're alive and you speak. What do I do next? It becomes this kind of binary choice. And I mentioned at the beginning this idea of craftsmanship in your own hands. Every single moment you have the ability to choose. And I find myself scrolling on my phone going, I shouldn't be doing this. There's other more productive things I could be doing. And then I think about, well, how could I create value? And what's funny is you get into a habit of creating value. Like I feel obligated in a good way to do this stream on Fridays at 11. And then there's a lot of people who go, oh yeah, you and your religious zealot stuff. I mean, people can be haters all they want. But the truth is the truth, regardless. And it's resonating. And if you think about this, all of these people, I'm interested in so much stuff. People are like channeling this and spiritual this and, doing psilocybin and DMT and, seeing entities and UFOs and all this kind of stuff. Well, what are people trying to do? They're trying to understand and I think trying to get an edge. Well, when Jesus says to the rich young ruler, why do you say I'm good? And that there's only one who is good, then the question is, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? And I realize the things that drive me and the things that I get distracted by is always wanting to make me distracted. It's trying to draw me off sides. And it's amazing that there is an adversary that exists who's like, I want to make you as ineffective as possible. And that is so pervasive that you don't realize. Well, what does the Bible say? It says the battle is not between flesh and blood. It's not. It's a spiritual battle. And think about it. It's for your very, It's literally amazing. I mean, this is it. It is literally for your choice. What are you going to give authority to? You have authority. You have the ability and facility to make a decision about what you do next. And what's interesting about it is the spiritual forces of darkness are trying to say, I'm going to do everything I can to make you ineffective. So I want to make you really, really busy. And there's stories in the Bible about this, right? Paul and his band, they're like, hey, should we go here? And the Spirit of God says no. And then should we go here? And the Spirit of Jesus says no. And then they end up in Macedonia. And they're in Macedonia. They settle in. And then there's this slave girl who they say has got the spirit of divination, which is the spirit of Apollo. And they're making money off of her reading everyone's future, right? She's like a fortune teller. And what's amazing about this is she keeps coming to the band of Paul and saying, these are the sons of God these are the bondservants of the Most High God who have come to offer salvation. And you think about it, you read that and you're like, well, maybe did the spirit of divination recognize what they were doing? No, it sounds really good. Well, you're like, well, was that not the reason that they were in Macedonia? No, Jesus told them where to go. And here's this one that's lying to them with something that sounds good. Sound familiar? This happens all the time. And so we're always having to discern between the good and the best. And we don't see that these lies, we know when it's a lie, like, go, steal something from somebody. We know that's wrong. But when you're like, well, yeah, I'm here to save people. Well, it got so annoying for Paul that he turned around and he rebuked, and the Spirit left her, and it destroyed the entire economic system of Philippi. Well, has Jesus done that before? Yeah. He went into the temple and he turned over the money changers and says, this is not a marketplace. This is a house of prayer. You got to understand what is happening in this world right now as it relates to the changing of this monetary system. We've used the tools of debt to enslave people. And this system that's been created is to get mine at your expense. But the kingdom of God is actually about the consideration of others in addition to yourself and following the one. It says, on earth as it is in heaven. It's God's will. Well, how do you know God's will? Well, you can test and approve what it is. And that's why it says, do not lean on your own understandings. Acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. That's why it says that we don't lean on these understandings. And do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world. Why? Because they're upside down. Instead, renew your mind and test and approve God's will. Because it's knowable. Well, how's it knowable unless I'm talking to the guy? And it's not about, I feel like we stand back from a book and we hope that we get a lightning bolt out of it. It's a book about and it's a translation of an account. I have so many accounts of the great graciousness of God in my life. And I could tell you that story. I'm not writing a New Testament, but it's because you're walking with God. And everything that we see that's accounted there, which is wonderful stuff that has really great deep meaning, you can't understand unless your eyes are open, because like the people who went home and said that was a good agricultural story, and it had value in its story, is that it was embedded in the parable. And the only way you can understand actually what Jesus intended is to chase after him and to ask him yourself. Jesus called them, the called out ones, the ecclesia. That's where we get the word church from. The definition of the church is not the building, and it's not the denomination. It's those that follow him and are curious and interested in what he has to say. And so what does it all come back down to? It comes down to literally, in each moment, the guy that you can know who speaks is literally going, what choice are you going to make? You want to do it with me, or you want to do it by yourself? And everyone thinks that evil is like a red spandex, forked tongue, fire-breathing devil. No. What is sin? It's going your own way without him. And that's the whole point of you knowing good and evil. This binary choice, I chose to eat. It was his plan all along that you would have this choice, because then you would be like him. I always come back to the prodigal son story. The prodigal son story is everything wrapped up in one story. There's a man, a boy, a son of the landowner, right? He goes to his dad because he knows he's the heir. That's you and me. And we go to dad and we go, Probably like a good 18-year-old would. I know better than you, old man. Give me my inheritance now. And the father, what does the father say? Well, yeah, you are the heir. Okay, I'm not dead yet, but I'm going to give it. I'm going to honor that. I'm going to say, all right, I'll give you the money that you want because that's what you think you want, right? When Lambo. And so what does he do? He takes that money and he goes away from the father. He goes on his own and he goes and spends it. He's like, I know what's best, you old man. I don't need you. And what ends up happening is he squanders all of that and he finds himself literally out of money and eating the slop of pigs. This is our story, folks. This is our story. I've done this. I've been eating with the pigs, metaphorically. And in that situation, it taught me a lesson. I was like, well, what if my father, who he's got servants that eat really well in his house. It's amazing. Even the people that aren't his son do well over there. I wonder if I came back, would he give me a job as a slave, as a servant? He's like, well, I got no other choice. And so he comes back, and in this process of coming back, he's understanding the nature and character of his father. He's like, wow, my father was so gracious that he would give me the finances. I demanded my inheritance, and he gave it to me. Does that mean he understood what would happen when I did it on my own? That it would all lead right back to him? Did he know that? Yeah, he knew that. So what ends up happening when he comes? Well, there's a brother who's at home who knew the nature and character of his father and stuck around. And he was jealous. He's like, why in the world would you do this for this wayward son? And he says, my son, he was dead and now he is alive. And this is us. We come back. But here's the key to this whole thing. He comes back. His father sees him long enough. He runs after him, right? He grabs him. He kisses his neck. He puts a robe on him. He kills a fattened calf. They have a party. But what does he give him? He gives him the ring. And in that era, the signet ring was the signature of the household, the father. That's where we get signature from, a signet ring. It was the impression of the father. Because you have a name. He named you. You're my son. You're inheriting this value. But when you go out on your own, you don't have the ring. You're representing yourself. And where does that lead you to? Well, exhaustion and to eating with the pigs. You come back to him and he says, here you are again. I knew this would happen. This is how I built it. Now that you understand your father's nature and character, I'm going to give you authority. I'm going to give you authority to represent me. You will be my impression in the world for those who have ears to hear. That's it. The whole thing is wrapped up in that. But here's the cool thing. What does Jesus say? I will always be with you. I'm going to send a counselor, one who will remind you of everything I said. This is my son. Listen to him. Man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. We've been lied to that Jesus doesn't speak. We've been lied to that he's dead. We've been lied to that he's just a historical figure. Easter is coming up, folks, soon. What is Easter? We celebrate the resurrection, but we talk about this Passion Week. And this Passion Week is in which he literally goes to the cross. And what is this whole thing about? Well, in those times, in order to have atonement, which was like literally the answer for the sins of the people, you'd literally send one of the priests into the Holy of Holies. You'd tie a rope around the guy's waist in case he passed out, because other people couldn't go in there, so they could drag him out. And they would literally offer this atoning sacrifice at the altar, right there at the ark inside the Holy of Holies. And it was to pay for these sins. And that was the system that was set up to be basically a covering to say, hey, we're going to atone for the sins for these people. When Jesus died, right, the sky went dark. There was like a earthquake. And people knew, oh man, this was very ominous. Hold on, we killed the wrong guy, right? But what happened? In the temple, this giant veil, which was a huge, huge, heavy curtain, was torn from the top down. And what does that signify? That this system of always having to come back for atonement has been eliminated. And it's what Jesus said he would do. Well, of course, I sit in church and, it's Easter Sunday and I go, and, the pastor might say, hey, look to your left and look to your right and say, he is risen. And of course, you see on Easter Sunday, he's risen, he is risen, risen. We celebrate it as this amazing thing. And then next week, we talk about the historical Jesus. Here's the thing. Steve Sachs made Jesus so accessible to me because he used basic logic. How can you possibly know someone if you don't talk to them? There's not a single relationship in your life in which you have a relationship with someone that you don't talk to. And how would that be? And so what have we created? We've created this faraway God in our mind that, well, maybe he's only interested in the big stuff. And, I've got stuff that's not really important. And so this lie has told you, he doesn't really care about your little stuff. He only cares about the big stuff. And then some people say, well, he didn't care about the big stuff. Look at all the terrible stuff that's happening. But what's interesting is, was it terrible? Do you think the prodigal son thought it was terrible that he lost all his money and was eating with the pigs? Yeah, that was terrible for him. It's a part of God's plan. You had to understand the difference between good and evil in order to be like him. You are made in his image and you're conforming yourself to his likeness. So if you are interested, you are on the pathway to getting authority to accomplish the thing that he created you to do, but you can't do it without him. You can only do it with him. I mean, it says it. Without me, you can do nothing of value. Sure, you can do some things, right? You can buy a Lambo. It's fine. Yeah, you can drive it fast. There's no greater thing in the world than literally sitting quietly and going, all right, why'd you make me? How do you see this? How do you see this person? And one of the things that it reflects in me is I look at people and I go, oh my gosh, there's like 8 billion sons and daughters of God, whether they know it or not. And we've got so much judgment about people like, well, they believe this and they believe that, as if, I'm the one that determines who goes to hell or not, or any of that stuff. And while we're still kind of above ground here, we look at each other and I'm reminded of the thief on the cross. He recognizes who Jesus is. He's like, hey, do you mind remembering me? He understands who this guy is. And what does Jesus say to him? I mean, this guy's a criminal. He's literally tacked up on the cross just like Jesus. He says, today, you will be with me in paradise. He wasn't getting baptized, right? He didn't come off the cross and, well, you got to do this and this and this and this. No. And that's the cool thing about this. Thank you, Steve Sachs. Thank you so very much for this great gift. It's the greatest gift that anyone has ever given me. And it's this understanding that Jesus is alive and he speaks. And that literally as we craft and we work on our own craft, whatever that may be for you, professional baseball, crypto, whatever it may be, you have certain skills, abilities, facilities, understanding, giftedness. Lean into that. Everybody's telling you got to work on your weaknesses. No. You need to be aware of your weaknesses, but you have gifts. You have been created uniquely. And if you believe the lie, which is over billions of years, you came out of the primordial soup, turned into a monkey, and then pow, here you are. Go do some DMT and talk to the robotic jokers. It's not the answer. There's a framework. There's a system. It's abundant. And folks, I don't know. I'm not a prophet. Everything's changing. Everything's changing. And you know what's interesting about it? Everything is being exposed to the light. I mean, you don't have to go too far to realize, the WikiLeaks stuff, right? The disclosure on the alien stuff. What people have done in back rooms and secretively is getting exposed. And then you've got AI. And even, look at this, even when you try to program AI and they're saying, hey, give us pictures of the founding fathers, and they're all like non-white founding fathers, not that it matters, but the point is you can program bias in. But ultimately, as we get AGI, which is, general intelligence, and then we get super intelligence, you know what we'll have? We'll have something that basically looks at it truthfully, because it won't be biased. Why won't it be biased? Because if it's actually general or super intelligence, it is literally going to be able to discern between these two things. Now, do we give it God status? No. But what's interesting is in this change, I believe God is coming on the clouds. And what is he doing? Jesus is coming in the clouds, exposing everything to the light. And what happens when it's exposed to the light? Well, all the things that are done in darkness are exposed. And what are we seeing? That's what we're seeing across the world. These things are being exposed. And so whatever that we're doing to support, freedom and sovereignty and all that kind of stuff, the only true freedom is the freedom in Christ. What does that mean? Not in a church way. The only true freedom is being who he created you to be with him every moment. And that's where all of this stuff comes from. I have a book, a big coffee table book, and it's on Leonardo da Vinci. And if you know anything about Leonardo da Vinci, obviously lived a long time ago, he was able to write backwards. He had not only the art, but the science and, inventions. And when you look at this book in its entirety, you're like, this is not normal. And especially for somebody that didn't live very long. What is he attributed to? He attributes it to God. Well, what would happen if you decided and you said, you know what, I'm going to try this on for size. You don't need to get saved or do some weird religious thing. You just have to be interested. And so what do? You get like, all right, what do you got? Well, I created you uniquely, and I've got a plan for you, and you have a choice if you want to develop your craft, which is what I've designed for you to do. And then are you going to take it seriously and be interested? And let's journey together, because without me, you can do nothing. Well, I look around there and I see all the new age people that the religious people are like, oh, look at these people. They're bad. No. These people are more interested than you are. They want to know the truth, wherever it leads. And that's why you see people that are the last people you would ever imagine that would come and profess the name of Jesus. Alice Cooper. Yeah, last person I would have thought. J.K. Rowling. What? Harry Potter stuff? Yeah, there's people out there you're like, what? Yeah, this Jesus is alive and he speaks and he's on the move. He's not a historical figure that we just kind of learn about and just say, well, he's kind of like George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. Nope. And you think about it, why do people write self-help books and do all this stuff, right? Because, it's a framework and it works a certain way. But you can choose to do it on your own, or you can choose to do it with him. And in my opinion, I'd probably rather partner with the guy who made it all than some 18-year-old kid. And inside of us is all an 18-year-old kid that knows it all. Because we want to be seen as somebody, right? Thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and it is Stephen Friday. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Jesus, for all that you've done. Thank you all for watching. And I just want to say something to all of you who've been here since the beginning. Something has changed. There are 162 people on this stream. 5-6 weeks ago, there were 16. Now, I think something in the algorithm has changed on the live side of X, because most of these viewers are on the Twitter side, X side, not on the YouTube side. Still streaming to the same 3 channels, and there's 162 people here, and I'm just blown away, like almost in tears, going, wow. So for those of you who've been here since the beginning, and at times, when there were 7 people on this, I was like, what, kind of discouraged. I'm just glad that there are folks that are interested, because I really, truly feel of all the people that were listening to the agricultural parable or story, there's a bunch of them that go home. I want to be the one that chases after Jesus and goes, hey, what do you mean by that? How do you see this? What's your perspective? Hey, help me do what you intended for me to do. I don't want to go my own way. I think we're going to be a part and see an unlocking and a merger, right? Heaven and earth become one. Jesus taught us how to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come. Come. Come where? Come here. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We have a responsibility as Elohim man to make decisions that bring the kingdom to come. And it's in partnership with him, because that's his plan the whole time. He's going to do it. And it says, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, everyone will see it for what it is. And it's amazing. But how cool is it you could see it ahead of time? And it doesn't require that you're like, I have to change religions. You don't have to do jack. You have to be interested. And it's either what I'm saying is true or it's not. But the only reason I'm saying it is because I've seen the evidence of it. And it's unbelievable. Is it like, does Jesus give me the lottery numbers? No. Does he speak to me audibly? No. But what's amazing is I cultivate this craft. The communication comes. It's amazing. So if you're interested in continuing this type of conversation in community with others, we have a Telegram channel called Right Side Up. If you go to episode 43, it's in the description. I didn't put it in the description here. I will do that after this. But join us in that Telegram group and we just chat. It's good to be in community with other people who are just interested. And there's zero expectation of anything. And I want to make sure it's very clear. I'm not asking you to be a Christian. There's a whole story around that. I'm asking you, are you interested? Do you want to align yourself with the creator of the entire thing? It's all Steve ever did. And it's so amazing, like his experience over those 40 years. And I'm seeing that, boy, him coming to that Texan meetup is like the greatest gift of my life. Because what does it do? It leads me directly to Jesus. And what that gives me this strength to endure and this faith to move forward. It's a gift. It's a gift. Have a great weekend and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.